You're a liar. Mrs. Catherine Morrison's voice cut through the silence of the room like a knife. A pathetic liar who makes up ridiculous stories to make herself look important. Yasmin Al-Farsi, 11, stood frozen beside her desk. Her hands trembled as she held the essay she had written so carefully the night before. The blue ink of the title still glowed under the fluorescent light. My Father, the General. Mrs. Morrison snatched the paper from the girl's hands with a sharp movement. The sound of tearing paper echoed through room 214 at Riverview Middle School in Alexandria, Virginia. Once. Twice. 3 times. The pieces fell like confetti onto Yasmin's worn-out shoes. Generals don't live in 2-bedroom apartments, Mrs. Morrison announced to the 28 students who watched in shocked silence. Generals don't drive old cars. Generals certainly don't have daughters who show up at school looking, she paused, her gaze sweeping Yasmin from head to toe, like that. Yasmin wore plain jeans, white sneakers bought on sale, and a navy blue hijab her mother had hand-sewn. Nothing wrong. Nothing extraordinary. But in Mrs. Morrison's mind, nothing that befitted the daughter of a high-ranking military officer. Go back to your seat, the teacher ordered, throwing the torn pieces in the trash. And next time, write about reality. Your father probably works in a warehouse or a restaurant. There's no shame in that. The shame is in lying. What Mrs. Catherine Morrison didn't know was that at that very moment, 12 kilometers away, General Khalil al-Farsi was finishing a classified meeting at the Pentagon on defense strategies in the Middle East. And that in less than 90 minutes, he would walk through that classroom door in full military uniform, 3 stars shining on each shoulder, accompanied by a security escort that would make Mrs. Morrison rethink every word she had just said. 6 hours earlier, Yasmin had woken up to the smell of Arabic coffee and the low sound of the English news coming from the living room. Her family lived in a modest apartment in the Riverside Gardens complex, where military families, immigrants, and workers shared narrow hallways and thin walls. The Al-Farsi apartment had 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and walls decorated with framed Arabic calligraphy, but no photos showed uniforms, medals, or any hint of Khalil al-Farsi's true career. Security protocol. Always protocol. Good morning, Habibi, her mother, Nadia, greeted her in Arabic as she prepared breakfast. She was a nurse at the military hospital in Fort Belvoir and worked night shifts that left deep circles under her gentle eyes. Yasmin found her father sitting at the table, dressed in civilian clothes, khaki pants and a blue polo shirt. To any neighbor passing by, he looked like any accountant or salesman. Nothing suggested that he commanded joint military operations between 3 countries or had direct access to the Secretary of Defense. Is today career day? Khalil asked in impeccable English, only a slight accent betraying his Lebanese origins. Yasmin bit her lip. Yes, Baba. I wrote about you. Her father exchanged a glance with Nadia. That look Yasmin knew so well. The look that said, our daughter deserves pride, but our situation is complicated. Mrs. Morrison had been teaching at Riverview Middle School for 19 years. She was 56, with gray hair pulled back into a tight bun, and a very clear view of the world. Some kids came from good families, and others needed to be kept grounded. Yasmin Al-Farsi, with her foreign last name and hijab, definitely fell into the second category. During morning break, Yasmin checked her phone. A message from her father, meeting at the Pentagon ended early. I'll be there at 10:30 for career day. Surprise. Yasmin's heart leapt. Her father rarely made it to school events because of his constant traveling. Syria, Iraq, military bases around the world. But today he was coming. Finally, everyone would see that she wasn't lying. At 9:45 a.m., the parents began to arrive. A lawyer in a suit, a veterinarian, a software engineer. Mrs. Morrison greeted each one with smiles of varying intensity. Class, she clapped her hands, before our guests introduce themselves, let's share the paragraphs you wrote about your parents' careers. One by one, the students stood up and read. Jake Morrison spoke proudly about his lawyer father who sued large corporations. Mrs. Morrison smiled radiantly. Emma Chen spoke about her mother, an engineer who designed bridges. Effusive praise. Then she called on Yasmin. Yasmin Al-Farsi. You're next. Yasmin stood up, her paper trembling slightly in her hands. My father is General Khalil Al-Farsi of the United States Armed Forces. He has served our country for 24 years, working in places like Iraq, Syria, and military bases around the world. He helps make important decisions to keep America safe and build partnerships with allied countries. My father always says that leadership means serving others, not yourself. He has worked hard to get where he is today, and I am very proud of him. Silence. Mrs. Morrison slowly rose from her chair, her eyes fixed on Yasmin with an intensity that made the temperature in the room drop a few degrees. And that's when she said the words that would change everything: "You're a liar." If you're enjoying this story of courage and truth, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. What happens next will leave you speechless. The room exploded with whispers. Yasmin felt her face burn. But Mrs. Morrison, I'm not lying. My father really is. Enough. The teacher raised her hand, silencing the girl. Yasmin, I've been teaching for 19 years. I know generals. I've taught generals' children. They don't live in modest apartments. They don't ride the school bus. And certainly, her voice grew colder, they don't come from, well, families like yours. Some parents in the room exchanged uncomfortable glances. Mr. Morrison, the lawyer, frowned. The veterinarian, Dr. Phillips, opened her mouth as if to say something, but hesitated. You know what I think? Mrs. Morrison crossed her arms. I think your father works in some administrative position at a military base. Maybe maintenance, maybe translation. They're respectable jobs, but you're ashamed and you've invented this fantasy about being a general's daughter. My father is not a translator. Yasmin's voice came out louder than she intended. He commands military operations. He meets with the Secretary of Defense. Muffled laughter echoed around the room. Tyler Bennett, sitting in the back row, whispered something to his classmate. Yasmin caught the words terrorist and liar. Mrs. Morrison didn't correct him. Yasmin Al-Farsi, go to the principal's office. Now. The teacher pointed to the door. I will not tolerate disrespect and blatant lies in my classroom, especially in front of our guests. Yasmin picked up her backpack with trembling hands. As she walked toward the door, she heard Mrs. Morrison say loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Class, this is an important lesson about integrity. When you come from certain backgrounds, the temptation to exaggerate or lie about your family can be strong. But character means accepting who you are, not pretending to be something you're not." The 11-year-old girl left the room with tears burning her eyes. In the empty hallway, she pulled out her phone and looked at her father's message again. I'll be there at 10:30. There were 43 minutes left. Only 43 minutes until everyone saw the truth. But 43 minutes felt like an eternity when you've just been called a liar in front of the entire school. What Yasmin didn't know was that at that very moment, her father was in the Pentagon parking lot, putting on his full military uniform. 3 stars on each shoulder. Service medals gleaming on his chest. 2 black SUVs were already positioned, engines running, security team checking routes. The general's assistant, Captain Jennifer Torres, held a briefcase with classified documents. General, are you sure about this? Torres asked as she checked the itinerary. We have the meeting with the Joint Chiefs at 2 p.m. My daughter needs me now, Captain. Khalil adjusted his military tie. The meeting can wait 90 minutes. Inside the school, Yasmin sat in the chair outside the principal's office. The secretary, Mrs. Palmer, a 60-year-old Latina woman who had always been kind to Yasmin, offered her a glass of water. Are you okay, dear? Yes, ma'am, Yasmin lied, discreetly wiping away a tear. The principal, Principal Davis, was on the phone in her office. Through the half-open door, Yasmin could hear fragments of the conversation. Security protocol. High-level visitor. We need to confirm credentials. Principal Davis was a 50-year-old black woman who had run Riverview for 7 years with a firm but fair hand. She hung up the phone and left her office, her face wearing an expression Yasmin couldn't quite read. Was it concern? Surprise? Something else? Yasmin, come in for a moment. The principal opened the door. Yasmin entered the office, bracing herself for more accusations, more humiliation. But Principal Davis didn't seem angry. She seemed thoughtful. I just received a very interesting call from the Fort Myer Security Department. They are coordinating a visit by a high-ranking officer to our school. Do you know anything about this? Yasmin swallowed hard. My dad is coming to Career Day. Your father. Principal Davis looked at the computer screen, where Yasmin's school record was open. Khalil Al-Farsi. Occupation listed as federal public servant. No further details. He puts that down for security reasons, ma'am. He's a general in the armed forces. The principal studied Yasmin's face for a long moment. Unlike Mrs. Morrison, she didn't see a liar. She saw a child telling the truth with desperation in her eyes. Go back to class, Yasmin. And, she paused, choosing her words carefully, get ready. The next few hours are going to be very interesting. When Yasmin returned to room 214, career day was continuing as if nothing had happened. The software engineer was presenting slides on artificial intelligence. Mrs. Morrison was sitting at her desk, smiling politely, completely oblivious to the hurricane that was about to walk through that door in exactly 22 minutes. At 10:28 a.m., a strange murmur began to spread through the school hallway. Firm footsteps, multiple, in perfect military sync. Low voices speaking in code. The unmistakable sound of tactical equipment being adjusted on belts. In room 214, the software engineer's presentation was interrupted when everyone noticed movement outside. Through the windows overlooking the parking lot, 3 black SUVs were parked in formation. Men and women in formal attire, clearly security, positioned themselves strategically around the main entrance. What's going on outside? Tyler Bennett stood up to get a better look. Other students followed. Mrs. Morrison frowned, annoyed by the distraction. Class, return to your seats. This is none of our. The classroom door opened. Principal Davis entered, his face a mask of professionalism, but his eyes gleaming with something that looked like impending justice. Mrs. Morrison, we have some very special visitors arriving. Visitors who require a security escort. A security escort? For career day. The teacher let out a nervous laugh. Principal Davis, that's a bit excessive, don't you think? No, Mrs. Morrison. It's not excessive when it comes to a 3-star general in the United States Armed Forces. The blood drained from Catherine Morrison's face. Her hands gripped the edge of the desk. What? Yasmin Al-Farsi's father is coming. General Khalil Al-Farsi. And I suggest you prepare to receive him properly. At that moment, the door swung open. First in was Captain Torres, in immaculate uniform, carrying a leather briefcase. She scanned the room with trained eyes, assessing, cataloging every detail. Then, filling the doorway with a presence that made the air in the room change, General Khalil Al-Farsi entered. His U.S. Army uniform was impeccable. Dark blue, perfect creases, every detail regulation. On his chest, rows of medals told stories of service that most people would never know. Bronze Star, Defense Service Medal, Iraq Campaign Medal, Afghanistan Campaign Medal. And on his shoulders, impossible to ignore, 3 silver stars on each side caught the light and seemed to burn like little suns. The room fell completely silent. Not the usual classroom silence. A silence of involuntary respect, of shock, of devastating realization. The parents present rose instinctively. Attorney Mr. Morrison straightened his posture as if standing before a judge. Dr. Phillips placed her hand over her heart. Even the students, who rarely showed reverence for any adult, stood open-mouthed. Baba. Yasmin's voice came out small, broken, relieved beyond words. General Khalil Al-Farsi searched the room for his daughter, and when his eyes met hers, the military man's professional mask cracked for a moment. He saw the red eyes, the dried tears on her cheeks, the shame she had carried alone. He crossed the room in 4 long strides, lowered himself to her level, and pulled his daughter into a tight embrace. I'm here, Habibi. I'm here. Yasmin buried her face in her father's uniform and cried. Not from sadness now, but from pure relief. Her father was there. The truth was there. Finally. When the general stood up, still holding Yasmin's hand, he turned to face the room. His voice was calm, controlled, but every word carried the weight of command developed over 24 years of leading soldiers in combat zones. Good morning. I am General Khalil Al-Farsi, United States Armed Forces. I apologize for the interruption and the security presence, but I promised my daughter I would be here today, and I don't break promises to my daughter. His eyes found Mrs. Morrison, who was leaning against her desk, white as a sheet, visibly shaking. I understand there has been some confusion about Yasmin's essay. Some doubt about the veracity of the information she shared. Mrs. Morrison opened her mouth, but no sound came out. General Al-Farsi continued, his voice still calm but sharp as a blade. My daughter wrote that I am a general who has served for 24 years. That is true. She wrote that I work in places like Iraq and Syria. That is also true. I have commanded joint operations, worked with international coalition forces, and yes, I meet regularly with the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He paused, letting each word sink in. My family lives in a modest apartment because military officers in certain positions keep a low profile for operational security reasons. We don't publicize our careers. We don't flaunt them. We don't put targets on our families' backs by announcing our positions. Tyler Bennett, the boy who had muttered terrorist earlier, was now slumped in his chair, wishing he could disappear. General Al-Farsi turned to Mrs. Morrison again. When a child shares their truth, especially a truth that doesn't seem to fit your preconceptions about what that truth should look like, the first response should be respectful verification. Not public accusation. Not humiliation. General Al-Farsi, Mrs. Morrison's voice finally worked, but it came out as a hoarse whisper. I didn't know. I assumed. I thought. You assumed that an 11-year-old girl with an Arabic last name and a hijab was lying about her father because our family didn't fit your image of what a high-ranking military family should look like. Tears began to stream down Mrs. Morrison's face. Not tears of self-pity, but of genuine shame, the kind that comes when you finally see the damage you've caused. General Al-Farsi, Yasmin. I made a terrible mistake. An unforgivable mistake. She turned to Yasmin, her voice breaking. Yasmin, I looked at you and saw only my own ignorant assumptions. I didn't see you. I didn't hear you. I judged your family based on prejudices I didn't even know I had. I tore up your work, called you a liar in front of everyone, and made you feel small for telling the truth. Mrs. Morrison placed her hand over her heart. There is no excuse for what I did. You deserved to be believed. You deserved respect. And I failed you completely. Forgive me. Yasmin looked at her father, who nodded gently. The choice was hers. The 11-year-old took a deep breath, showing a maturity that made several adults in the room feel ashamed. Mrs. Morrison, my dad always says that everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what we do next. Maybe you can learn to really listen to children, even when our stories seem impossible. The wisdom in those words, coming from a child who had been humiliated hours earlier, struck every person present. Principal Davis stepped forward. General Al-Farsi, on behalf of Riverview Middle School, I offer my sincere apologies. What happened today should never have occurred, and I assure you that we will implement immediate changes. Mandatory training on implicit bias for all faculty. New protocols for verifying information before questioning students. And a complete review of how we approach diversity in our school. I appreciate that, Principal Davis, the general replied. But more important than policies is changing hearts. My daughter shouldn't have to have her father show up in uniform to be believed. No child should. For the next 20 minutes, General Al-Farsi gave an impromptu presentation on military service, leadership, and the true meaning of patriotism. He spoke about soldiers of all backgrounds, religions, and ethnicities serving side by side. He answered students' questions with patience and honesty. When Tyler Bennett, the boy who had made the comment about terrorism, timidly raised his hand to ask about becoming a soldier, the general treated him with the same seriousness he would treat an adult. Leadership, he said, looking directly at Mrs. Morrison, is not about position or power. It's about serving those under your responsibility. It's about protecting them, believing in them, and never ever making them feel small. Before leaving, General Al-Farsi did something unexpected. From his pocket, he took out a command coin, a military symbol given only for exceptional service. He placed it in Mrs. Morrison's hand. I'm not giving you this for what happened today. I'm giving it to you for what you will do tomorrow. For the hard work of examining your own biases. For the courage to change. Use it as a reminder that real growth comes from our most painful mistakes. Mrs. Morrison held the coin as if it were sacred, waving as tears continued to fall. 3 months later, Riverview Middle School was a different place. The entire faculty had completed 40 hours of training on implicit bias, not as punishment, but as a genuine commitment to change. Mrs. Morrison had become one of the most vocal leaders, sharing her painful story in workshops for other educators. In room 214, a new values chart hung on the wall that read, "In this room, we believe first and question with respect. We never assume someone is lying because their truth seems impossible." Yasmin had founded the Truth Circle, a peer support group where children could share their stories without fear of judgment. Students from all backgrounds participated: children of immigrants, children of military families, youth from marginalized communities. Tyler Bennett had become one of the most active members, using his own shame as motivation to do better. The photo from that day, of General Al-Farsi in full uniform kneeling beside his daughter while the room watched in respectful silence, went viral on social media. Not because it was spectacular, but because it represented something everyone needed to see: a child telling the truth, being believed, and a system recognizing that it needed to change. The Al-Farsi family returned to their quiet life in their modest apartment. General Khalil continued his classified work, often absent, always serving. Nadia continued to save lives at the military hospital. And Yasmin continued to be just Yasmin, but now with a confidence that no one could take away from her. She had learned that her truth had value. That her voice mattered. That even when the whole world doubts you, standing firm in what is true is always worth it. Mrs. Catherine Morrison carried that command coin in her pocket every day. Not as a trophy, but as a humble reminder that she had hurt a child with her prejudices, and that every day was an opportunity to do better. She would never again look at a student and assume she knew their story based on appearances. Because in the end, the most powerful lesson didn't come from the general. It came from an 11-year-old girl who refused to lie about who she was, even when it would have been easier. Who maintained her dignity even when her truth was torn to shreds. Who taught the adults around her that courage isn't about rank or power. It's about standing firm in who you are, no matter who doubts you. The truth always matters. You always matter. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to dim your light to make others feel comfortable in their darkness. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs to remember that their truth has power. And never forget, you don't need a general to validate your worth. You are already enough, just as you are.